everyone, and welcome to the December SMPTE New York section meeting. And tonight we are discussing cloud services for media and entertainment. Of course, as always, I want to thank our sponsors who are generous enough to sponsor the New York SMPTE section. I also want to let you know that, we have our holiday party coming up in this December 21st. Of course, it won't look like this, which is a picture from a previous holiday party. We won't be meeting face to face, but we will be meeting virtually. We have an application that we're using, a web app that we're using called Wander, and that allows us to meet in smaller groups. And that you go into circles like you would in a physical meeting, and you can join up with a smaller group and have a discussion, and then you can leave that group at will and join another group whenever you'd like. Again, that's December 21st at 5:30 p.m. to 8. So have coming up next month, we have another cloud service meeting, which is based on processing, playout, and distribution. And that'll be on Wednesday, January 27th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. There will be announcements going out for that. This evening, we have the first of the two sessions on cloud services. This one focuses on production and post-production.
Tools that are used for creating content rather than tools for distributing content. Why don't we go around the horn here and have everybody introduce themselves. So let's start with Greg.
Hey, Greg Anderson here, and I'm a senior systems engineer for WarnerMedia, formerly based out of, when we used to be based out of places, Hudson Yards, New York City. And excited to talk to you guys about what we're doing in the cloud tonight.
Great, okay. And then we have Scott Bounds.
Good evening, everybody. Scott Bounds. So I'm a media cloud architect with Microsoft. I'm based here in New York City, and I am actually coming to you from Greenwich Village right now.
All right. A real New York event. Wow. Okay, Mr. Whitehead.
Hi, I'm John Whitehead from the New York Times. I'm a multimedia publishing senior software engineer, and I'm based in New York, but working out of Connecticut for the last few months.
Okay, great. And last but not least, Mr. Kapoor from Google.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anshul Kapoor from Google. I look after media broadcasting solutions from Google, and I'm actually coming to you from London.
All right, you're up late. Thanks for waiting for us. All right, that's great. Okay, so without further ado, Greg, you have a little presentation for us?
Yeah, let's get into it. We're in the midst, of this pretty big shift right now, as we all know. There's really common conversation, I think, that's happening across the media and entertainment industry. At HBO, we've been leveraging our private cloud infrastructure out of New York. Others have gone straight maybe into a public cloud platform, or others are leveraging desktop as a service solutions, all with the goal in mind to provide creative tool sets to the users we traditionally supported on-prem environment. Now they're doing this all remote. And through this whole, grand experiment, we're all finding, hey, this is actually working really well. For us, we kind of engineered that system with that goal in mind, that it could sustain, remote workloads. But we didn't know until the switch was flipped, and it's been holding up great so far. And then for a lot of us, it's POC systems, kind of were for cloud or for maybe some remote display type protocols, and those very quickly turned into the production system pretty much overnight. So out of this all, we've gained lots of proof points that this tech is viable. And that's kind of helped us get through a lot of that risk aversion, you know, in our industry that we usually run into when we look to adopt new tech. And of course, from the business angle of it, you know, there's many advantages, lots of buzzwords that will be thrown around it. But as engineers and architects, you know, we've been pretty much given this green light now from our organizations to really dive full force into this transition. And maybe some of the things we stood up were a temporary measure. And now we really need to say, okay, if we're going to go to the cloud, how are we going to do this? How are we going to refine it? And what are we going to do so it supports these long-term goals? And, you know, spoiler alert, right? There's no one-size-fits-all approach to doing this. All of our workflows, our business needs, and our scale, all those drivers are going to be really just, you know, variable for everyone. But it's definitely an exciting opportunity. So, you know, as engineers and architects, we get to define, you know, how we're going to do post-production in the cloud, and that it scales from, you know, very small work groups to really large scale enterprise type deployments. And, you know, we're going to learn a ton along the way and hope to keep, you know, all the knowledge shared. And so we start, you know, diving into this. We're starting to put the pieces together. And, you know, it's very clear there are many traits necessary for an engineer to go in and build a well-designed and sustainable cloud strategy and architecture. You know, it's going to be hard pressed to find that one engineer who really possesses mastery in all of these skills. So we're starting to identify areas of knowledge gaps where we need to start to dig into so we can take benefit of all these cloud services. And we're going to be putting on many hats along the way, maybe things that traditionally as a post-production engineer we weren't doing. So if we think that this, you know, mystical full stack post-production engineer, you know, this unicorn of a beast is going to come flying and solve all our problems, you know, we're not going to get anywhere. But we do have a really good foundation for a lot of these concepts. You know, we've been keeping pace with more of this IT-centric type of post-production world. So we're getting a lot of this, and now we just have to see how those things shift into the cloud space. And I think what's really unique is that, yes, there are many established cloud architects, there's specialists. We have them in our own organizations, but they maybe don't understand the nuance of media and entertainment workflows. And as we all know, you know, we're special. The needs of our users are special. You know, just the end user experience is paramount, where there's very little tolerance to latency, things of that nature, where somebody working on a system that's more, you know, just office backend working is very different than somebody trying to do frame accurate editing remotely. So a lot of the conversations we're having, you know, kind of at the start of all this is about cloud-ready workflows. And, you know, I think we really need to start talking about cloud-ready engineers and how we're going to start to evolve into that type of organization. So looking kind of inward towards how we do things at WarnerMedia, you know, we're very structured in, you know, levels of expertise and experience in our support organization and our engineering organizations. So the cool thing is there's really an entry point for everybody, regardless of where you are. You know, you might be level 1 where you really know the creative tools, you know, Avid, you know, Adobe, you know, Creative Suite stuff. And you may lack some of that infrastructure experience and maybe the big picture sort of enterprise workflows. But this is unique for us because, you know, you have very little friction now to get in and get your hands on things. You can start with the basics of network, storage, and compute, but you can do it in the cloud. There's a very low, and in many cases, no barrier to get your hands in there because there's free tiers, you know, hours of console time that you can go in and build something and try to do that with some sort of creative end goal in mind. For more of that level 2 type of experience where you've got advanced workflow knowledge, and you might be the point of escalation for some pockets of your on-prem infrastructure, now's the time to really start getting yourself involved in organizational discussions as you're starting to figure out your strategy. And how, what are the challenges? What is our approach? And start to identify with yourselves those skill gaps, and try to then get involved in dev POC type efforts you might be doing, so you can build on those weaknesses. And then we might have more on the experienced, that resident subject matter expert type of role, where they know the infrastructure, they know the workflows, they're kind of approaching that unicorn status, and they've got some cloud exposure. Now they should really be building something, and with emphasis on, is this thing viable? Can I demonstrate it to stakeholders, to operations, and start to look towards how we're going to automate this so that this is something that scales, it's reusable. How are we going to cost model this, and just keep refining that? And that's where we really need to start putting on that architect hat. Get familiar with Visio and your favorite drawing tools. And in all of this, I do think that there is value in those formal training and cert programs out there that each of the platforms offer. But equal to that, there's so many free and available resources out there today. The documentation from the vendors are fantastic, and I think there's a lot that can be gained that way as well. So maybe some things for the technical leader side of the house, right? So what are the things that can help facilitate us as we're starting to really get into the weeds of this cloud transition? I think it starts with getting us in there so we can build, and that we're building something that is on par with the workflows that we're trying to execute. So with that, of course, does come some cost, right? But there may be partnerships and things of that nature that you already have with your cloud vendor of choice, where you can establish this budget, if you want to call it that, right? Where you have a dev POC type of account access. And through that, for something pretty modest, it's going to benefit the engineer and the manager, right? Because engineers, we can start really building some real world type of designs with a beefy edit VM, and then we start to control the costs. We start to understand how those things can be leveraged. And the manager side can start to wrap their head around about, how can we start to model these things? How can we monitor? How can we analyze the costs? And as we're starting to go down this path, and we're going to go headfirst into it, we need to pause, and we need to know if there are established rules to the road that we should be following that may come up from a higher, organizational side of things. Are there best practices? Are there standards? Are there security programs that we should be aware of before we start building, so that we don't have to, tear it all down and then build it back up? And again, there may be access to resources, that these vendors offer with, technical account managers, training opportunities, workshops, that will help us kind of start on the right path. At a larger organization like WarnerMedia, there's a lot of pockets where there are people doing things in the cloud. There are specialists in networking, specialists in security with the cloud. So we really start to have to network, us and them. And in big organizations, that can be tough. But we have to start to build those relationships so that we can start to untangle a lot of this complex plumbing that is no doubt going to exist in a hybrid, in some cases, multi-cloud type of architecture. And when we go into those conversations, it really helps that you have a well-defined use case and your requirements before you engage those specialists, because they're highly in demand. So you really want to, establish that, good-natured relationship right out of the gate, and they're going to be a really good ally to help you out down the road. And I think we also, need help from the technical leaders to really go in and challenge the traditional vendors that play in our workflows. Just because we can technically do something in the cloud, does it make sense that we do it in the cloud this way, right? Like a lift and shift, where we might put something that transcodes, files, and we put a VM up in the cloud with a whole bunch of CPU and run that thing 24/7, but it only has to actually do work, 10% of the time. There's that whole, thought process of what is cloud native and how applications get, engineered, right, to make best use of those cloud services. So we really have to challenge them, see where their roadmap has, their own transformation of their own product suite, and how does it align with us, so we can roadmap out how we're going to build things. So all this stuff leads to how we're going to architect it. So, with all those sort of, recommendations, tips on how we can actually get started and start building, I did want to share a little bit about what we're doing with our path to the cloud. So in my role as systems engineer, right now we're primarily focusing in on HBO Max marketing and original HBO programming. And right now, we've got sort of this concept of a private cloud, and that's our current state. So we built this system a couple of years ago. I guess time is becoming very blurry, but I guess we've been in production for a little over a year and a half. So it's a relatively new footprint, and we're supporting around 300 concurrent users accessing the environment. So they're logging in, they're getting a virtual desktop, and they're editing, they're doing design work. We have, engineering developers all the way through QC type of evaluators accessing these systems. So we virtualized the desktop, and we virtualized the backend as well for all those servers that comprise the production asset management system, the file-based ingest systems, databases. We're very comfortable with that virtualization. And at the remote side for our users, we've deployed hundreds of Zero clients for the remote endpoints. We're centrally managing those, so they're getting a great user experience. In addition to that, they've got the ability to tap into high-res online content. They don't have to worry about proxy type of workflows. There's really no sacrifice there. And it's an instant restore if they need content from our archive library. And it's a very secure, multi-factor authentication integrated type of workflow for logging. And we've been able to extend a lot of features to these users, going all the way into third monitor type review and approval use cases. So in all, the private cloud, it's working great, and we've done a lot of the hard stuff already to virtualize this stuff. So while we could stop there, that would be great, but eventually we are going to run up to a point where, hey, the hardware needs to be refreshed. We're paying, hardware support, all these kind of things, right, that traditionally we've dealt with when we buy, massive systems, year one, and then there's going to be a point in time where we gotta refresh it. So, there's a multitude of drivers to then start to leverage public cloud. Content production, especially with HBO Max, is only going to increase. So we really don't want to have to go down the path of having to rack and stack more compute, more storage, because there's real estate constraints. So there's lots of consolidation going on. trying to stay fresh with the tech stack. And, unfortunately, right, this is a reality, less and less personnel to be able to maintain the systems on-prem. We can also get these systems closer to a really dispersed workforce. So we can leverage putting these services in multi-regions. And also, from the business side of the house, being able to manage the costs based on utilization and make it more tailored to spinning up the resources that are needed project to project. And a big one for us is broadening the scope of our DR and business continuity that we currently have today. So we could probably spend a whole nother one of these sessions just talking about all the challenges to actually doing this. It's really a long list, especially when you get to enterprise type of scale where you've got so many dependencies to on-prem resources. You have Active Directory, you have DNS, you have multi-factor authentication applications, you have the actual storage of your high-res content, license servers, your video routing systems, on and on and on it goes. And then you also look at the costs just to meet the current level of availability that these users are accustomed to. Like I said, today they can get high-res content, they can restore very quickly if they have to come from the archives, and they've got really beefy VMs to help them through. So with that comes cost if you try to achieve parity. And then of course, not all areas of cloud workflow are ready when it comes to audio mixing, high-end finishing, things like that we can't really just go 100% all in on this just yet. So the approach is looking at a very laddered multi-year approach where we start to really have big buckets of objectives we try to hit and develop that timeline so we're syncing to hardware and support refresh cycles. So from a high level, for us, the first phase is that we can leverage cloud to augment our current VDI capacity, but very much still relying on on-prem backend services. So users, can get into the current on-prem facility, or if they need to, if we overrun what we can do on-prem, they can get in through that cloud region. Then comes our, sort of objective B down the road is that then we have full business continuity, where that if we lose that direct connectivity to on-prem, from the cloud, we're no longer beholden to those back-end services and we're all self-sustaining in the cloud. And that's going to give us that proof of scale and system availability. And then the pie in the sky, the dream, right, is full-scale cloud post-production where we've got full functionality in the cloud. We're scaled and cross-region redundant for business continuity. So then, our user from anywhere, is able to log in to a region that is, most logical for the least amount of latency, but they have access to all the same services and really transparent to them so they get the best experience from that remote location. So with that, I'll open up to the panel if you guys have any questions.
Yes, we have. Where do you see WarnerMedia going long term as a mix between cloud-based between a cloud-based approach and an on-prem approach? Where do you see that split happening, or do you expect at some point that it'll only be user workstations on-prem and everything else will be in the cloud? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, so in the case of, and I can really only speak to in depth about what we're doing in New York, but we're probably in, year 2.5 of the life cycle for this gear, right? It's all pretty new hardware that we've purchased, and the traditional massive capital purchase. So I think the transition is going to be as things, equipment, storage, support contracts start to hit their end dates, if we find that the technology is feasible, then it's a cloud first approach where we're going to try to use the cloud to host those services, right? So for example, for VDI, right, instead of having to buy more physical servers to host that on-prem, if we overrun the capacity we're able to sustain, then don't buy an extra server, start to slowly ramp it up to a point where maybe there's an inflection point down the road. But I don't think that's with any realistic timeline in the next 2 years. It's probably somewhere outside of that.
Mm-hmm. All right, and you had mentioned audio mixing being one of the pain points in the cloud. Where do you foresee that going?
That's a great question. For the first part of that, we have to actually, get some of the audio, digital, audio workstation vendors out there to support even just virtualizing the application, right?
Yeah.
That's step one. Then it's getting it to the point where you can do that sort of, subframe, editing of audio where it gets a little tricky. And then of course you've got the actual very tactile surface type of control that those mixers use, which becomes a challenge, trying to pass that stuff through from a remote connection to have it really responsive. So I think we've got a ways to go before that's.
Yeah, you're looking maybe that in the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, that's one of those things you'd have to kick back, to see where in the roadmap for the vendors is, where are you at with having this cloud ready?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And next up, we have Scott Bounds from Microsoft, who's a media cloud architect. And he is guiding customers through the business transformation to the cloud from the Microsoft point of view. And he will be providing us with the next presentation. So Scott, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Ed. So it's actually great because I think Greg did a really good job of setting the context. So I'm Scott Bounds. I'm based here in New York City. I'm a media cloud architect. So I work with Microsoft, and I work with all our media entertainment customers. That includes studios and broadcasters and sports leagues, advertisers, publishers, etc. On really about how to take these workflows and how to leverage that with the cloud. From a little bit of Microsoft's perspective, so if I look across the board of M&E, so really today I really want to focus on the far left, which is really content production. So we think of that's really the kind of what Greg talked about with editing in the cloud, even things like burst rendering, and think about jobs like that. And then as you kind of go through the space, part of that really also really ties with collaboration. So think about, you're not sitting in the same building anymore. How do you collaborate? Everyone's working from home in this post-COVID environment. How do you use these collaboration tools? And then how does that integrate then as you think about your workflows and people doing their job? And then once you're done with that content, it kind of moves into the content supply chain. How do you optimize that? How do you store it? How does that go through distribution? And then you have all that stuff on the right, which is really around knowing your audience and data, personalization, all that kind of stuff when you really think about delivery. But let's really today really focus on the left. So if we think about what we're hearing, and I think, we just heard the key things that are driving these things. One is collaboration and remote workforces. Even before COVID, I will say the difference is, this time last year, we were talking to a lot of people about virtualizing, editing in the cloud and content production in the cloud. And really people were dipping their toes. They were really taking a look, how can I engineer this to be perfect? And I think what we're seeing is what has happened since, March of last year is people are really moving from evaluation, kicking the tires to say, how can I get something to actually work? So really we're seeing this is even with outside of COVID, if you think about the remote productions and all the different folks folks inside the pipeline where you're sharing systems, et cetera. I think the other place where the cloud really comes in is scaling this content. You know, you asked earlier about, you know, what about on-prem to the cloud? But I think a lot of this was really driving this, where you see the cloud as the scalability. So being able to really start as we're going from, you know, HD to 4K to 8K, more and more pieces of content, more and more storage. So when you start looking at petabytes and petabytes and petabytes, how can you actually scale that and manage that? But also the ability for the elasticity. So you have 10 editors. I need to spin up a pod for 3 months to do something. You could spin that up, pay for it, spin it back down. So I think that's very key. And also underlying in all of this is security. So I think in a lot of ways, when you think about cloud production, you're actually increasing security because, you know, once again, think about some of those workflows and some of the partner organizations you might be working with. You're not using, they're great tools, but you're not taking pieces of unwatermarked content and shipping them around via, you know, Media Shuttle or Spare or something else. So, and once again, you bring in freelancers, they sit inside of that environment. So you can really start thinking about security, reliability, what happens inside of your system. So that's kind of what we see people looking at, and we're seeing how cloud goes in. Now, when you look at, you know, once again, it goes right into what we're really seeing from if you have an end user, what do you really need from that? One is you got to have, you know, remote users, definitely today, and I'll talk a little bit about what kind of bandwidth that you actually need from, you know, from working at home. So once again, you're going to have remote users maintaining the content production. You're not, you know, this isn't flying around, especially with some of the A-list content, that high-end content like HBO has. Also, if you think about it, really leveraging the talent. You know, I have some peers, you know, some friends of mine are working over in London in a post house, and once again, they're saying, I need to hire 100 people or 200 people. I can't find them in this location. So you know that talent's going to be around the world. And even in some geos, you know, especially like London, it's very expensive. So people are looking at how to leverage the cloud without dropping in these large workstations, et cetera. But that's the key thing. Can you have that high performance desktop experience with a big GPU in the cloud? And that's really what's going to drive it. The way that we actually, you know, working with our partners like Avid and Adobe, when people start looking at a POC, we actually take some content, set it up in a system, sit down an editor and say, do your job. And really, at the end of the day, if they can't really tell if it was running on locally right under their desk or up in the cloud, we know that they could actually get their job done in this type of environment. If you're thinking about this, there's, you know, I usually kind of start with these questions. One is, what functionality do you need? You know, is this an Avid workflow? Is this Adobe Creative Cloud? Is this, you know, some type of visual effects? You know, what functionality do you actually need? And that's really going to drive some different aspects of the size and the type of machines you actually have to have up in the cloud. The one really key factor is where your users are at. So a lot of times what this is really around is latency plays the keyest part. So, you know, right now I'm sitting here in New York City. I'm going to be, I'll do a quick demo. My machine, I think for this, I have machines sitting in the east, but this machine is actually sitting in South Central in Texas. So once again, what is the latency in milliseconds between the machine you're sitting on to the actual virtual machine where you're doing your editing? That's really key. So I wouldn't want to be trying to connect to a virtual machine sitting over in, you know, Europe or you know, or in a data center sitting in Australia. Just the latency and the speed of light really plays in. So when you start thinking about this, that's one of the big considerations as you think about where you want to place these edit pods in the different regions, you know, around the world. The last two kind of go together. So, you know, especially since COVID, you know, the when, it's really how fast do you need a solution? And that sometimes really ties in with the level of security. So, you know, if we were talking like March, April last year, it really was, hey, how fast can I get something where editors can actually get, you know, can get productive to do their job? You know, you have things here like single sign-on. Do you want to enable single sign-on to your corporate environment, your corporate Active Directory? So in that case, you start thinking about, okay, I need single sign-on. I may need multi-factor authentication. How do I then set up, you know, virtual private networks and hook all that infrastructure together and really set that up? So these are the key questions that, you know, this is actually where I start the conversation if we want to start thinking about what we can do inside of an organization. There's some questions earlier about, I know they asked about audio, but, really where are we at today with what's possible? And if you think about the different things, today, editing in the cloud on both, Media Composer or Premiere, that's definitely there. Motion graphics, visual effects, all of that, we have people today doing, everything from promo compliance workflows all the way to, editing, major motion pictures in the cloud. So once again, that's definitely there today. Now, where do you think you go on-prem? I think, definitely you're looking at color grading and finishing. That's really coming back to on-prem. And really, this is some of the technology. We talked earlier about audio. If you think about today, a key factor here are technologies like Teradici, PC over IP as a protocol. Right now, that's 8-bit. It's not 10-bit color. So once again, there's also some things about the audio channels for some of these remote desktop technologies. So that's the technology that we're really dealing with to really light these things up, as well as the system. So color grading, Blackmagic and the consoles that people use, how would that actually be virtualized and things like that? Those are definitely things that we think about. But everything on the left, everything in green, that's what people are doing today, that you can definitely think about how that actually impacts and really drives your workflows. Once again, I talk about location and where you're at. So from our standpoint, we have our platform's called Azure. We have 69 regions around the world. So what that means is when you start thinking about this, so hey, I have somebody sitting here on the East Coast. I'm gonna hit one of these regions on the East Coast. Or if I'm on the West Coast, I'm going to go into one of U.S. and West. Think about Europe. We also have data centers in Germany, in India, in China, in Australia. So once again, what you really want to think about is that latency. With a Teradici client, PC over IP, that can be, once again, depending on your editors and the experience, that really also plays into it. You can definitely want, 10, 20 milliseconds up to, some people are pushing, 80 milliseconds or so. So that really plays in. So this is a key part of, do you actually have the capacity where you need that? And then also you have to start thinking about, okay, I'm going to have, people work, maybe have a London office and a New York office are working on content. How are you going to sync that across there? So definitely key things to think about when we actually put these together. And in our case too, all of our data centers are actually tied together with our own fiber. So we have really good connections and latency. So what does this look like? At a high level, you can kind of think about it as you're going to have these powerful GPU-powered workstations in the cloud, high-end storage, and that allows you to create wherever you need to, whether you're on the road, in a hotel, at a home office, a main office. And once again, there's even some scenarios where you have some customers are like, well, I'm actually going to keep all the content in the cloud, and maybe I want to run a full Media Composer client on-prem. So I'm going to sit a high-end workstation with Media Composer, and I want to edit against content sitting up in the cloud. We have people definitely looking at that. But once again, that comes down to the connectivity. So in those cases, those are express route direct connections, and the latency that you want to see for a scenario like that, you definitely want to make sure your connections is about like 8 to 10 milliseconds. So once again, you have these different areas for the performance that you need. And then on the other side too, not only the creators, but also reviewing, they talked about display monitors, over the shoulder editing. How do you enable that? NDI is really a great technology that people are looking to utilize. Now, I never actually saw Greg's slide, but this is like a high level architecture for what a solution would look like. So if you think about this, really you'd have these solutions sitting up in the cloud. So really what you have here is you would have your client VMs. These are, GPU enabled virtual machines, really sized by what your requirements are. So that's going to give you the desktop that people are going to log into. The other aspect is you're going to have high-speed storage. Now, once again, that could just be high-speed shared file storage, something like Azure files, like an SMB shared, like if you used on-prem, all the way up to like an Azure Nexus that's actually front-ended. So, with that performance. So if you think about it, this could be an Azure Nexus with online storage, backed by things like premium blob. So that gives you that piece. The piece that really ties it together, the protocol that actually is doing this display is really PC over IP. So, and once again, I know Greg mentioned earlier, for typical, general user knowledge worker, you can use things like, RDP, terminal services, Citrix, protocols such as that. But when you get to that high end, that top end of the end where you really need that, the color and the no distortion and no loss, that's where people really are looking at, Teradici to really deliver that from an editing experience. The other piece that's really needed here too is, an Active Directory domain controller. So this is the case where actually I would log in. It would actually, if a machine's not on, it would spin one up, and I'd log in with all my credentials. So that's kind of the with the virtual networking wrapped around that. And then how you actually connect to that. So if you think about it, you'd have remote users. So me sitting here in my apartment, I can actually come in over the internet, get to one of these workstations and just edit it. And from a security standpoint, I could totally lock this down where you can only come in and edit content. You're not going to, once you're in there, you're not taking anything out. You're not going to go to anywhere. You're not even going to have internet access. So that's a key aspect. Also from a site, you can have this site-to-site VPN. This is like if you want to authenticate back into, authentication. So that could be an Active Directory on-prem. You're authenticating. The last place is, and I know Greg showed this for Warner, is ExpressRoute. That's a direct connection, from a location into Azure. And, that can vary to a slower speed, like, sub gig all the way up to 100 gigabytes. So this is the case where this could probably be not only those online systems for authentication, but this is if you want to have a hybrid scenario. So in the case of Media Central, you actually have a Nexus on-prem and a Nexus in the cloud, and they're actually syncing back and forth. Or you could also think about this as just shared file storage, using Adobe Premiere, maybe Adobe Teams. So you actually have some Azure files up here synchronizing on-prem and, synchronizing with Azure File Sync between those. And people could either edit on-prem or in the cloud, and it'll keep everything synchronized. So that's a key aspect. And that's like the bare basics. Then you start adding other things in. So you need file upload, download. That's where we would actually, add in things like Signia and Aspera. Now, what's really important that we're really seeing a lot of people do is how do you actually stand these up? And that really comes into automation. So we're seeing a lot of our customers really leveraging Terraform. So if you think about it, I come in and I want that, I want, 5 edit seats or 10 edit seats, and I need, 20 terabytes of storage and these, 5 user accounts or whatever it is. So with that, you can very easy using, infrastructure as code, kick off a script that will stand up that entire, infrastructure inside of Azure and enable that. And then when you're finished, you can just, tear it all back down. So being able to spin these up and spin these down very quickly is really key from a pod standpoint, as well as just a client. So, you need more clients going against, in that environment. You need to go from 5 seats to 10 seats. Very, very easy to do and totally scripted out. If I go from, if I think about this from a Nexus standpoint, really the only thing that you're looking at is, you'd be putting in the Avid Media Central infrastructure. So these are all those servers. I saw on Greg's slide, he had some of those servers. So once again, this could be some VMs for Nexus, and there's other aspects of an Avid. If this was maybe more of a straight scenario with shared storage with Premiere, you could also have Premiere clients editing against a Nexus. You just have a Nexus there. So once again, the flexibility of what you do on-prem, the same as in the cloud with that remote connection. If I take a little bit deeper, I take a look inside of this. These are the key things you actually think about. So you have these big VMs. We have Series 3, Series 4. One of them is actually NVIDIA-based GPUs or AMD-based GPUs. All have backed by premium SSD storage. And then the really key is, what are the size of the workloads? So do I need a NV12 with 12 CPU with 12 virtual processors? Do I need a 24? So those are really, and there's some guidance both from Avid and Adobe to kind of map there. Really understanding networking, understanding storage. There's blob storage, which is object storage. There's premium blob, which is really fast. That's what Nexus connects to. And there's also files, standard and premium. So these are the, really understanding the type of content you're dealing with. So is this, what are the codecs? What are the speeds? What do you need? So that kind of layers in those components. And then you say, what else do I need? Well, really what we're providing here is a workstation. So, once again, for video editing, that would be an Avid and Adobe. If you were doing something with visual effects, those could be running, like Maya or something like that. So those are the key components there. So I thought I'd just jump out and give you a quick demo to show this is really true. So this is my desktop that's running up in Azure today. This is actually sitting in Texas. Whenever I have to do any video editing, I have a notebook computer right here. I actually connect to this, and I just had to create a video last week where this is 12 GPUs. It's a whole lot of memory. It's got it's got a bunch of CPUs. So I can actually render out what I needed to do in like 2 minutes versus like the hour and a half it would have taken on my PC. So, and actually you can also really tell if I come into here, if I do a quick speed test, you can kind of see what I'm really cooking with gas because, from a Microsoft standpoint, I'm actually pulling if you were sitting inside the Microsoft data center. Whereas here, I'm actually on Spectrum. So hopefully I have 200 megabit down. Now, when you start thinking about this from requirements, I talked about latency, the way that you can kind of think about the type of bandwidth for your end users, the rule of thumb is about 20 megabits a monitor. So I can actually run dual monitors for something like this. Also, this is on my PC, and I know we mentioned zero client, so I have one. This is like a little Dell Wise box that I actually use. So I can actually use this, hook up a monitor or two to this, my keyboard, everything else, and I could be editing from that. So there's not even a workstation or anything. I just plug that right in. And I even have, from that, if you even had a tablet you wanted to use, you could just plug that right in. So if I take a look, whatever I want to do. So from an Adobe standpoint, I could be playing around in Lightroom, with Photoshop, and once again, if I, maybe I'm thinking about, I can really do whatever I want, from a photography standpoint. But also, what's really key is Premiere. So this right here is a case study that I did for something. So what you can actually see, and I know I'm on a Zoom now. If you were actually sitting what I'm seeing, I can be inside of here, and I'm actually scrubbing the video. I'm actually editing the video. I can drop in all these different components. So this is the same as if I was running Premiere on my desktop. And especially when you get to the point where you're rendering this out, when I go to export this media, that's where I really have, all the horsepower that I'm looking at there. So this workstation I'm actually working on, this actually says everything. It's running in, actually that was running in US East 2. Sorry, it wasn't in South Central. So that's 12 processors, 112 gig of RAM. I have some other hard drives attached to here. That's really what you're kind of looking at and what you're dealing with. Also, if you think about a full-blown deployment, this right here is an edit pod, with Avid. So what you can kind of see is I have a bunch of virtual machines. So I have, here's this is actually configured for 2 edit clients. I can see an Avid, licensing server, and I see a couple Nexus servers down here. Networking, a Teradici box sitting there, and then you actually have all the storage accounts. I have that Nexus Online storage backed by Premium Blob. So once again, that's how you can kind of think about it. And when you think about the cloud, you can also look at the cost associated with it. So if I wanted to, I could jump into the portal and I could say, how much is this? Is this a resource group with all these resources costing per month? So as Greg mentioned, from an engineer standpoint, even at Microsoft, I have a budget. So I have a budget per month where they don't want my Azure to go above a certain threshold. So actually, I have to keep an eye on that. So if I'm doing a lot of things where I may be indexing a lot of video, or I'm running a lot of these, maybe a couple of these different environments, that can really start driving my consumption. That then I will actually go in there and take a look, and I don't want to get nasty emails from my boss either. from inside of there. So once again, you have all these cost management. So that's the other aspect is, right now this is all turned off because I haven't used this in a few weeks, but I can just turn this all back on and drive it from there. So with that, that's kind of what I put together to give you a brief view of how we view, how we view content creation. This is what I spend most of my time talking about with customers. I would say right now we have, you have customers with very different workflows actually going today. We have, probably one of the first people to go there was Promo Shop. So just in the last week, I've talked to broadcasters and studios and advertising agencies and everyone with, who are thinking about this and how you can actually enable these with these scenarios. So with that, I left some time for some Q&A. Any questions that I can grab?
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to mention to the audience is that at the end of the discussion, we're going to have a Q&A session with all the presenters. So at that point, we'll be bringing up, Q&A, for all the panelists. So Scott, what kind of time frame do you see for color grading and finishing being implemented in the cloud?
Yeah, I think it's, I think people are pushing it. So I think, one thing that as we talked with our partners at Teradici is for them to get to 10-bit color. And I'm not sure exactly where that's on the roadmap. So that's definitely going to be part of it. So if you're working with Teradici, definitely, that's one aspect. And I think the other two is just, as we work with, companies like Blackmagic, the tools, that big console, how would you want to virtualize something like that? And also, not only are we looking at the content creation, what's also interesting is a big topic that people are talking to now are virtual control rooms. So what we're seeing is how could we actually do that type of all these different videos and editing those videos from a control room standpoint and actually putting that in the cloud. So you're really seeing the virtualization drive even things like that. But it was interesting. I did an event, I think it was HPA, and there was an engineer from Skywalker Labs, and even this was probably in the springtime, maybe May or something. And once again, I think the needs are kind of driving some of this, where they were actually doing some sound stuff that they had to do for some things. Once again, it might not be perfectly engineered, but the need was kind of driving the usage there. But I would say, there's a couple different factors. One is the vendors that really do that, and that kind of comes from our standpoint. We're building the underlying cloud, and then really those ISV vendors who are building those systems to make sure they can be virtualized and then also virtualized in a cloud. And then how can that actually work? So it's happening. I'm really not sure if I can really throw a time against it.
Yeah, very good. So thank you, Scott. And next up, we have John Whitehead from the New York Times. He is with the Multimedia engineering group there. John is a broadcast workflow engineer and systems architect for New York Times as part of a multimedia publishing team. He helps to operate the on-premises and cloud video production distribution infrastructure and media asset management solutions for the New York Times. Previously, John has worked in the television industry for Positive Flux as a consulting engineer and at Apple as well. So, John, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Scott, as well, for giving me the lead in there. The topic of my conversation is going to be about live production itself. So looking at virtualizing the master control and other workflows. At the New York Times, we decided to look at the possibilities for live production in the cloud. And what we mean by live production might be a little different than what some broadcasters provide. We do have a studio, we do have the capabilities to do a traditional broadcast, but we don't do that all that often. Most of our focus over the last couple of years has been on doing live events that are produced outside of our facility. So news wire services, network pool feeds, generally of political events such as White House press conferences and the congressional hearings that we've been having a lot in the last couple of years. So we don't do a lot of editing to this when we're presenting it live. We just put the feed up raw. What we have done in some situations is provided video analysis alongside the video. So we've had our reporters giving feedback and doing essentially a rolling blog as that is going on. But there are some limitations in what we had been doing that we wanted to try to address using some of the strengths of our engineering facility. So video engineering, as we approach it at the New York Times, has two kind of aspects to it. The primary one is a modern internet-based cloud-native approach for providing all of our products through a microservices architecture that we can then connect with all of our online systems, from web pages to publishing to our mobile devices, Android and iOS. And the focus on what we've done has been, let's build in-house exactly what we need, and let's connect it all and be able to help all the different aspects of the company with the capabilities that each individual technology can provide. So a couple of examples that we've done for video have been products that we've called Media Factory, which has built a encoding pipeline for us, and Live Manager, which has been a front end into some of our recording and streaming capabilities. Where this is different from a traditional broadcast facility kind of ends when we've had to do things in that studio, or when we've tried to integrate with some of the more traditional workflows based around SDI and other non-internet technologies. So an example of how we've built our live streaming solution has been to take that traditional master control, which right now is based around Blackmagic design and some other kind of medium tier technologies, and connect it to the internet and to our viewers using the Elemental Live solution. And basically that's converting all of our SDI workflows into something that is then, in this case, HLS. It allows us to basically bridge the world from our local in-house facility of video and push it out to something viewable on any device. And what we've been really focusing on in the last couple of years, as I said, has been wire feeds and pool feeds. And these originate from outside our building. And we acquire them through RTMP feeds over the public internet. We have some SDI direct connections for some of them. But again, the central hub for all this has been the Elemental on-premises hardware. And the challenge for this is moving from the master control functionality to something more internet-based. Is we wanted to be able to provide access to our video journalists and producers that may not have a traditional broadcast background. So they're not familiar with how to run a control room, but they know how to navigate the internet. So in this situation, we decided to use some of our engineering capabilities to build a front end into Elemental. And so we've taken all of those networked feeds and SDI feeds and brought them into a web interface that people can use. And this is actually running in the cloud, but what it does is, again, bridge that world for us to allow people who may not have all the skill sets to be able to real time handle any issue that comes in front of them, and try to boil it down to just the couple of features that they need to have access to in order to provide a live video stream. So as we're looking at how we could improve this year, we were really paying attention to the video stream itself. And we were taking these straight through without any extra graphics capabilities, without any kinds of enhancements. And we realized that to really step up our game and provide a lot of the support that we wanted to for the presidential race this summer, that we should invest in a new production switcher. Our old one was, 6 or 7 years old. We wanted to have a graphics package, which had never been a component of our prior setup. And we also wanted to be able to provide closed captioning. So 3 basic live production capabilities, but ones that were new to our facility. And we had a deadline of August. So we wanted to be able to have the first conventions be running with these enhanced features. Then 2020 happened. We started working from home in March and realized that our deadlines were going to be kind of tight. And looking again at what we were trying to do, as March turned into April, we soon realized that we're not going to be in the facility. We're not going to be able to be doing live studio shoots. And again, the priority for us was really, how do we enhance the pool feeds and wire feeds anyway? And so we started looking at this picture and realizing we're starting a lot of these feeds from outside our building, and all of our users now are working from home and they're outside the building. So what benefit does building all of this infrastructure within our facility give us? And so we, around April or so in May, we started to really reconsider our project. Can we deliver the same functionality, but do we need to do it in the headquarters? Maybe the cloud capabilities that we've been hearing about for the last couple of years that we've heard are still, maybe 5 years out or 10 years out. Maybe enough of them are there today that we can deploy it for our use case. And we realized that really this was low risk for us because because one of the benefits of cloud is how rapidly you can deploy it and test it. We realized that even if we did that in May and June, even if we decided we didn't like it or it didn't work for us, we'd still have enough time to get some hardware in place and quickly spin up something that would deliver for us. But we were confident that we could make the cloud work because of the expertise of our engineering staff. We have a lot of experience in this area, building internet-first cloud-native applications. And so we decided to look for a solution out there that could deliver that for us. We really wanted something that was cloud-first, that would be built the way that we would build it in-house. It had the time and resources and expertise. We wanted it to be scalable. We wanted something that if we needed to spin up a large, essentially control room, we could do that. Or if we wanted to do a small one, we could do that. We wanted to be able to build 2 or 3 control rooms if we needed to. A lot of times we're doing one event at a time, but occasionally we need to be able to do multiple events. But building all this on premises and being limited by hardware and physical space meant that that flexibility would not be there if they wouldn't be as scalable as a cloud solution could be. And we didn't really think that we wanted to get essentially a single user system and just have it be a screen shared single user system. There are some existing technologies out there that we could have made work in the cloud, or we could have set them up within our facility and then just done screen sharing, some of the VDI workflows that make sense for post-production, as Greg and Scott mentioned. But we wanted something that really played to our strengths here and would, again, be built with the components and technologies that we would have preferred ourselves. So after looking at over a dozen vendors and really thinking about this for a while, we found a solution. And this was Grass Valley's AMP product. It's AMPP. It's a cloud media platform, which they had just developed with Blizzard Entertainment and had deployed as a beta product with them, a co-developed beta product. But the timing of them kind of wrapping up that first version of it was perfect for us to be able to spin this up in time for the conventions. So they turned out to be a great partner that allowed us to take a technology that wasn't quite visible or not quite obvious to everyone yet, and get an early view of it. And they were able to work with us when we had the understandable caveats of working with beta products. So the nice part about the Grass Valley solution is it basically gave us a central master control solution, but because of their approach to the problem, it is easy to integrate other solutions with them. So the first thing we did was add graphics packages to it, and Singular Live was the one that met our needs most perfectly. And it's basically an HTML rendering tool that will work on video in this cloud solution. The other component of it was a captioning solution. EEG is known, and we were considering getting their hardware. But again, since all of this was in the cloud, we realized we could use their cloud solution. And so EEG Falcon allows us to send a copy of the video and audio, and then they redistribute it to any of a number of caption providers that we can use for human or AI-based captioning. We found that human captioners did a better job of contextually editing and being able to handle difficult situations such as during debates. But I guess the key win of all this stuff was we didn't have to have a consultant that really knew all of the ins and outs and knew the one way that these would work together to configure it. We could use our software engineers and cloud engineers to be able to build a solution that tied together all these pieces in a way that we were familiar. Much as Greg kind of said that cloud engineers are kind of the way of the future, we wouldn't have been able to do this project without that kind of level of expertise. So the basic, I won't get too deep into this, but the basic pieces that we had were from the vendors, Grass Valley, Singular, and EEG, but we had to come up with a way to tie them together. We had a local version of GVAMP running that would do the communications between all those. And then we also found out, because of some of the challenges we had in getting different video codecs, different video protocols into Grass Valley, for instance, they didn't support RTMP right away. We needed to build our own solution for that. But again, it was pretty straightforward using standard technologies known to cloud engineers. So what did all of this get to on the user side was this interface from Grass Valley. And there are a couple things to note here. One is each of these pieces, each of these windows that you see here is a separate service. It's again, called a microservice that each one can be individually turned on or turned off. We can create as many of them as we need, or connect them in different ways. You can see a little bit of that in the system dashboard, how things are connected. But in the lower right, you see a switcher that is very comfortable to the technical directors that we hired to run the show. They didn't have to use or learn some strange some strange user interface that was custom to an application. This is part of the reason why we liked going with Grass Valley, because we knew that they had the expertise and the history that they would provide a solution that really was familiar to broadcast personnel. In the upper right there, you can see in the gray window part of the Singular Live solution, which was allowing us to preview graphics. We had a second producer, or basically doing the character generation editing during the show, but we had preset most of the effects. And because this is HTML, anyone who is a web developer, JavaScript or other languages, can go in and change the styling of this. So we took some of our Adobe Premiere templates and our After Effects templates and essentially converted them into HTML that then could easily be overlaid onto the videos that we were doing. And on the upper left, you see that we have a multi-view, and again, fairly traditional output on all of this stuff. But behind the scenes, or underneath it all, is something familiar to the cloud engineers. It's a list of services. Each one can be turned on, turned off. They're versioned, so we can deploy test versions in a safe environment and keep the stable ones for a production environment. It just gave us a lot of flexibility, and it's an almost instantaneous system. For instance, we ran into issues with some of our multiple signals having delays that were out of sync, or they were out of sync. And so we wanted to add delays. So we just created a couple new workloads. We routed the video through them. This was something we could do on the fly without having to have anticipated that we needed to buy hardware for it, or having to buy hardware that we didn't end up using. The flexibility of having this cloud approach really worked well for us. Here's a little expanded view on some of how the signal flow works for all this. Again, it's fairly traditional to what you would expect in a master control, except instead of SDI cables connecting everything, they're soft connections between everything. And some of the inputs we had were RTMP because that's what the wire services and our providers were giving us. But they can be 2110, they can be NDI and other protocols as well. Again, the flexibility of this, where this could be deployed as a new feature by GRASS without us having to requisition it and purchase it separately, is a real game changer for us. And the results really spoke for themselves with our users. I mean, it enabled them to work from home. They were able to handle all of this switching and production work from their desktops at home with just a moderate internet connection. One of the key technologies that enabled this to happen was something that you may have heard of in the last couple of years, WebRTC, which gives essentially a glass-to-glass, a really optimized glass-to-glass performance, very low latency video stream from the server to our desktops. And so people were able to take these video inputs and switch them, and within a split second, have them take into the program feed. And there was, after doing that a couple times, there was absolutely no friction to people doing that within doing it remotely. The other flexibility that this gives you is each of these components is really a web presentation of part of those services. So the application that's running is based on Chromium and Chrome technologies, but it works in a web browser as well. And some facilities have been using Microsoft Surface interfaces to be able to do it with a touchscreen. We didn't have a chance to try that out, but the other thing is we're hoping if there are hardware capabilities here, maybe in the future, we're asking GRASS if they can maybe build one that would be optimized for this more modular and flexible solution. So the other kind of win here that really helped our management justification of this was that it was cheaper for us. We didn't have to have a huge cash outlay of building our facility. We could basically just pay as we go and commit to what performance we wanted to have and what features we wanted to have without having to justify that we're going to be using it for several years at a very high capacity. So that gives us a lot of advantages. It also means that perhaps you start nickel and diming yourself when you're going, oh, this event is going to be, it's not going to have as much viewership. Maybe we don't want to turn on as many features or something like that, because you haven't paid for the equipment and it's not just sitting there available to you. You sometimes could get distracted by different, this different cost model. And also for New York Times, one of our large costs was staffing, just because not being a traditional broadcast facility, we don't have a large staff of technical directors and closed caption professionals on hand. So we would have to hire them for each of the events that we were doing. So it turns out that a lot of the service costs were actually the lower part of our costs, and the human costs and were really the highest cost for us, but that may be different for others. There were some considerations that we ran into. The remote network performance is pretty forgiving, and it's really helpful to have people familiar with networking and able to troubleshoot. But with most modern home connections, it was perfectly sufficient. We had no complaints from our users, and the only time I saw an issue with network performance interfering with our ability to do live production was when I was in a hotel and had a 2 megabit connection, and it just kept dropping, and it was, not a pleasant experience. But the nice thing about this cloud approach is each of those components is running in the background. Other technical directors and producers can take over even if your connection completely goes offline. And again, with the microservices approach, if something were to stop working, we could restart it and put it back into the workflow easily. And again, as Greg had mentioned, cloud engineers are really helpful. But overall, it worked. We were on time, under budget. We had no major difficulties, no disasters, nothing, no on-air issues that impacted the productions. And it was fun. We delivered on time with these debates and the run-up to the election. And so we were very happy with our experiment with cloud, and we're going to be sticking with it for a long time. That's really all I have. Ready for questions in the other panel?
Yeah, thank you, John. What were some of your largest challenges in moving to the cloud?
I think really having the idea of how you want to architect this was important to us. This is not a plug and play system where that you just unbox it, plug it in, and then have it work for you. You do need to take some time to really understand what the cloud technologies that it's built on are, and make sure you build optimal solutions for that. The solutions are all pretty much available to you if you do it correctly and do it intelligently. It's very flexible in that sense, but without a good sense of that, if you jump in too quickly, you may have challenges.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure everyone knows that the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen can be used to post questions for the Q&A session. I see that we have one more that just came in. And thank you, John. And up next, we have Anshul Kapoor, who is with Google, and he's with business development. Anshul helps media corporations launch video services in the cloud. Previously, Anshul had various leadership roles at Ericsson, including head of production.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to you guys. As Ed was mentioning, based out of London, I look after the broadcast and media solutions for Google Cloud. So yeah, it's a little bit later. It might be a little bit slow, so just bear with me. So in I think before we talk about today's session and more, especially about content production, I think it's good to acknowledge in some ways that, media industry in general has been going through a transition for a while, and when it's only gotten accelerated in the last, I would say it feels like forever, but probably it's like 7 or 8 months. And I think the business is changing. There is a lot of growth in direct-to-consumer offerings, and the pay TV ecosystem is a little bit changing in some ways. And but I think one thing that we should remember through all of this, and that has actually stayed constant, is the audience's need for and the demand for content. The quality of content and the demand of content has actually gone up, especially during this time of COVID, right? So I think was focusing more about the production. I just wanted to talk about what we do and how we helping, as Google Cloud are helping world's largest entertainment companies in some ways meet their audience needs. And I think we're helping them in 4 key areas. The first one, which obviously I'll dwell a bit deeper, is we'll be working to provide robust and resilient content production pipelines. The number of scripted television shows produced in the US continues to reach new record highs. I mean, it's happening year after year. The launch of new services is only accelerating that. And actually, as we have seen the halt of any kind of content production, especially this year, our customers are looking for new ways to utilize content production and create new content. Second thing that we're going to talk, that we focus with our customers, is that we're helping companies manage and enhance their content through the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and not just enhance the content, but actually maximizing the value of their library in some cases. The third thing is where we're helping our customers is providing scalable infrastructure to provide direct-to-consumer offerings and distribution platform to the audiences. So our customers can actually distribute their content to audiences globally. And finally, we're helping customers understand their audiences more deeper. So looking at getting the data back from the audiences, getting the right signals, and separating in some ways signal from noise from those cases, and applying some level of predictive analysis to help our media companies understand their audiences and better target content towards them. I mean, it's fair to say the media companies need to continually innovate and transform in all of these areas while maintaining a safe and collaborative environment for their workforce to succeed, especially in today's fast-changing media landscape. So let's look at the content production in a bit more detail. So with live, as I was mentioning, with live action filming for many TV shows and filming essentially on pause this year, and with many editors and artists sheltering in place, there has been an acute need for remote post-production workflows in the industry. And while a lot of these companies have been working with hybrid workflows for quite some time, we have seen companies experiment with cloud-native workflows, especially during this year. And I will talk about some of the companies and how they are utilizing that. So in today's section, I'm going to focus on 3 specific areas of content production. So first one, we're going to talk about a little bit on the use cases on archiving content to the cloud, and it kind of little bit links with New York Times and what John was talking about. Second thing, we will talk about remote work and remote work production in some cases. And thirdly, and I believe quite importantly, and complementing what my colleagues were also talking in this session, is that once the content is on cloud and you're producing and delivering content from the cloud, what else can you do in order to get the more intelligence out of your content? It's no breaking news. Content is still king. I think it's firmly established, especially this year. The content archive and distribution deals have created a new wave of mergers and acquisitions in the media industry, especially this year. And I think it's, to be fair, I think COVID-19 has also shown a light on, in some amount to media companies that some of them have done actually better than others in some ways to not just modernize their media archive, but more importantly, be able to monetize it, because there was a dearth of new content. And I think that is going to continue. And the content, as the content pipelines have stalled, and the new releases have completely paused. So and we believe that this change of not just archiving the content onto the cloud, but in some ways utilizing that archive to tell new stories in some ways is going to be more and more relevant in the future. I think the reality is that most media companies today still store incredible, valuable content in films and photos, etc. And a lot of it is in outdated ways that are restricting their ability to activate the archive quickly and in certain breaking news and breaking events. And there are a lot of inefficiencies in the workflows. One that we recognize is that the storage infrastructure in certain cases by itself is actually outdated. With the LTO tapes and the version of the LTO tapes and the robots and the I think it needs in some of those cases we've seen that it needs some level of work. The second thing we would mention is that the manual tagging is actually quite time intensive. These processes are wasting hours and valuable headcount for our companies. And we do recognize that there is still a gap between what machine can do, and especially in the case of, like John was mentioning, in certain cases, the nuances of the content and understanding that. But I think we can free up, and we are working with customers to free up the effort and simplify the processes. So editors are essentially focusing on just looking at those discrepancies rather than tagging the whole video. And a third thing I would like to highlight is I mean, in our view, actually, it feels like it's not the whole archive infrastructure is not well equipped for the global complexities. I mean, in certain cases, organizations are looking for more efficient and accurate ways to complete the translation and versioning required to produce and deliver the same piece of content to a new geography. So that is something that we are seeing across the board. Just talking a little bit about, I mean, what kind of partners we're working with media partners, and some of them have been mentioned by my colleagues also, and in the different workflows that that we have all deployed on cloud, from Teradicci, NVIDIA, Bebop Technologies, and most of them to bring the GPU accelerated, highly powered workstations to artists everywhere. For tasks like visual effects, animations, film editing. And I think an important part also, as was highlighted before, is that we know, I mean, securing the content is of prime importance, and we totally understand it's a largest concern for our customers, especially in the case of when you're working in a remote collaboration kind of workflows. So we have worked extensively with the media industry to ensure Tier 1 compliance with all the major film studios, and also we undergo a regular independent security evaluations audit compliant with MPA standards. I think top of mind, and I think it's good to bring up, is especially after we heard from New York Times, is that how New York Times has used Google Cloud to evolve the visual storytelling in the newsroom, in some ways to migrate their archives into the cloud and be able to tell news stories using the same archive content. And there's a lot more information about this on the web that you can find about. The second thing, as I mentioned before, I'm going to talk about is in some ways the Google Cloud Virtual Studio and post-production suite, and what do we do in those cases. So I think At a high level, this is how I would say it works. We work with an array of partners to capitalize on our global private network to virtualize our customers' workstation, providing artists with the lowest latency experience. Our virtual workstations are backed by Google Cloud resources that can render those great images quickly and securely. So, and maybe just going in a bit more detail, in each of those aspects is from building, it's allowing our customers to easily customize the virtual workstation running on the Google Cloud platform with one or more NVIDIA GPUs attached to it. Second, from a delivery point of view, and be able to deliver a VM, allow our customers to deliver a VM to your end users who are essentially editors, the artists. And third, for orchestration point of view, being able, allowing you to deploy, manage, assign hundreds of VMs to users with one of our connection broker partners in certain cases. Fourth thing I would like to highlight is the storing of the content, being able to be giving you an ability to store your content or asset in the highest capacity, highest speed storage, like Google Cloud File Store, available for all of our workstations. The next thing in the render, what we are providing you is render your frames with a rendering service, our render as a service that we provide to our customers, and you can choose the right partners that will meet those needs depending on your needs. And lastly, I think it's most important in some ways is that especially when you are dealing with when you're telling stories, is to giving the artist the flexibility to bring their vision to life, right? And I think it's important in the case. So what does it look like a little bit, and how does it work? Maybe at a high level, it's if you're building a studio natively on cloud, this is how, for example, you would do it. Artist workstation on the left are virtualized using Teradicci PC over IP protocol, and then they connect to the cloud via our Google Cloud VPN or dedicated partner interconnect if that is what you require. And these workstations are backed by our Google Cloud resources as you continue, resources and going across the value chain to this VFX specific elements such as Queue Manager for VFX to schedule the shots to be rendered in the right order. So that I think is increasingly important. But I think going back to the principles of build, deliver, orchestrate, store, and render, like we talked about in the previous slide, giving our customers, in this case, ability to build easily customizable workstation running on Google Cloud with one or more native GPU attached, and as I mentioned, and also delivering the VM to your artists in certain cases, and ability to give you allow you to store your content in the highest quality possible. So this is how VFX workflow on Google Cloud would look like. And just giving an example of how it has been done, Luma Pictures, a visual effects company, has completed over, I think, 300 odd shots for Spider-Man, Far From Home, with about third created totally, completely on cloud. And by utilizing Google Cloud's global infrastructure, teams in LA, in Australia, Melbourne, they were able to work across the clock to produce the visuals for the movie collaboratively. But on the other side of, I think, just still talking about production, but moving away a little bit from the VFX, and I think sad but true. But this is the remote work is the new normal as we're doing it in this conference too. And I think it's going to stay in some ways. And stories and audiences are heart of every successful media business. And there is one last critical factor driving the successful transformation to the future, is how to get the teams evolved and collaborate. And it was good to see how New York Times was doing it in this way. And actually, this is where a lot of our customers have been using our Google Workspace to actually collaborate and create. So it's not just the final production part of it, but the whole creative process and how to collaborate and create that using Google Cloud. An example of that is Yahoo Finance. We helped the broadcast teams in Yahoo Finance to, to transition about, I believe, about 150 reporters, producers, anchors, technicians from the legacy TV studio to 100% work from home environment just overnight. And within a span of few hours, our team worked with them to set up seamless 8 hours of live broadcast on air from locations in the US, in London, and providing people with critical news and information, especially as people, the urge and the requirement and the need for news is more and more prevalent at this point. So we've talked a little bit about archive migration and production on the remote production on the cloud. Last thing I'm going to talk about is actually something that we believe is quite differentiating in some ways, and it is equally important than keeping broadcasts on air. Companies who typically rely on live content are also looking at ways to reinvigorate, it's a bit late, these libraries and back catalog to help fill the audience demand for the content. But I think it's fair to say that for over 40% of the CIOs still struggle with managing the data growth of their content. Google Cloud's AI and the machine learning capabilities in conjunction with partners like Tapeoff or Iron Mountain can help customers digitize, categorize, index, and even activate the content. And I think the reason I'm highlighting this, and I think it's quite important, because the extracting information from a media archive using machine learning, those processes and those technologies have been around for a while. And I think it's not just with Google, but there are a lot of players who are doing it. And we believe it's actually improving year on year. But I think more important in our discussions with the customer is that has been that, okay, how do I get the next level of value out of that content? You create so much of metadata out of my media archive, but so what in some ways, right? So it's still hard for me to find those pieces of content. So this is an example of work we have done. We're working with Fox Sports to help them automate the, in my view, probably one of the most manual processes in media and entertainment. It's labeling and discovering and storing the video assets. The Fox Sports utilizes Google Cloud's video search capabilities and advanced machine learning to efficiently unlock the value of the content. So essentially what we do in these cases is that if there's an existing metadata that is we ingest your video assets and any existing metadata that you may have for the video. It could be the editorial metadata that's ingested onto the platform and index. Beyond that, we actually allow you to, we automatically extract information using machine learning from the video and index that also. Third thing, we on top of that, in certain cases, working with some customers, we allow you to do, you can even create your own custom machine learning models to extract information that is based on your business rules in certain cases, and we index all of that information. And more importantly, we actually at the next step, we expose that information to you as, to be honest, in as simple way as Google search. So being able to do those canonical search, and time-based search, etc., that we are used to doing on Google search, but all on your archive, and so that you can best utilize your content in certain cases and extract the content in your archive and decide whether you want to repurpose the content, create a new version of it, or just distribute the content to your audiences. So with this, I think just talking a little bit about the scale of work which we are doing, and also it becomes more and more important when you're working with resources across the globe, and you don't really need to work in one region and one zone in certain cases. And like I was explaining, that Luma is doing that. And also distributing the content, we all need a reliable, globally available infrastructure that scales to meet the demand. I think at Google Cloud, we try and do that based on our global infrastructure. It's the same infrastructure in some ways that we're using it to deliver the low latency services like Stadia and YouTube in certain cases. Our data centers are distributed across 23, 24 different geographies in certain cases. And most importantly, I think especially in the case of media, these locations are tied together with a private fiber optic network in certain cases. Most of these, and that gives an advantage to our customers, is that because it's going through, most of the video travels through the private Google Cloud network, the level of packet drops that you can expect is much, much lower. And obviously, as you know, it's lower the packet drops, lower the jitter, lower the latency, etc. So it gives, we aim to give our customers the smoothest viewing experience, and especially if you're working in production workflows, being able to edit the content and process the content closest to you is important for us. In closing, I think just a little bit of a plug to talk about is the many companies, media companies, that are turning to Google Cloud for our infrastructure, data, and analytic capabilities, and a growing ecosystem of partners. So yeah, so and with that, thank you very much, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to you.
So I guess to get things kicked off, maybe we just go around and see, what are the key points and what are the key takeaways here in terms of moving workflows to the cloud?
Sure. So I would say it's really finding that starting point. So, if you're thinking about this, let's take a look at what really fits the scenario and really work that out. So it could be, we see a lot of customers start with some of the easier workflows to really start dipping their toes into it. Maybe it's a, promo workflow or something like that. Also, I think what's really important is understand the different technologies you're going to loop together. So when you start talking about live, really understanding things like SRT and how all that plays in and how you're going to move video with SRT or, NDI. So I really think the key is really scoping out a project and delivering on that. Don't try to boil the entire ocean. I think as people start learning more about this, and it's changing rapidly.
Yeah, so I see you shaking your head there. Maybe you could add a comment or two.
No, I totally agree with Scott. Thanks for pulling me on. No, I totally agree with Scott, and just you need to start somewhere from live. And I think our view is that there are 3 or 4 steps to look at when you're doing any kind of live production. Is that firstly, most importantly, and I think all the presenters talked about it, to try a initial first step, MVP of kinds onto the cloud, measure the baseline of performance that you want. And on top of that, then start to optimize your workflow, your partners that you might be using, or the technologies, whether you need to ingest content using open internet, or do you need interconnect, or what kind of, like Scott was mentioning, what kind of error correction technologies, be it SRT or any kind of dedicated, or do you want to utilize the plain UDP for your workflows, RTMP? So those things, start something and then start evolving from there. So that's what we typically see with our customers.
Yeah, I didn't, maybe Greg or John, you could comment on some of the monitoring challenges that you've had in the cloud.
Yeah, that's a big nut to crack when we talk about remote monitoring. And there's a lot of options to go with. Scott hit on a few. There's NDI. We have 2110 routing over IP in our facility. So that's great. But when you try to start to get that to the edge of, right now for us, it's very much an on-prem facility, but it's no different than when we start doing it in the cloud, is that those are more, kind of your house codecs, right? That we've kind of been used to. They have a higher bit rate, and to then transport that over a wide area network, can be a challenge. So that's when those SRT, WebRTC codecs, are going to help us a lot. And what we're finding is that, like any of this, and I thought John hit on this really well, was they had to do a lot of glue work to kind of put together all these pieces and parts to make it a workable solution. And we've been pretty successful at that, where we're able to take a NDI source or a 2110 out of a VM and basically convert that to SRT, and then securely get that out to a user's home destination. So we've probably solved maybe 75, 80% of those use cases of the over-the-shoulder monitoring, review and approval. Somebody I saw asked the question, that kind of concept of the director sitting with you in the room, providing feedback on an edit. We can start to deliver that kind of experience. It just gets really hard when you're trying to do the real high-end color finishing work, and that's what we got to solve next.
John, comments or?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all those previous comments. One of the challenges that we had with handling all these different protocols is certain hardware vendors or software vendors would support some of them and others wouldn't. And that's where having to make those conversions ourselves added overhead, added perhaps, quality reduction and things like that. Since most of our end users are watching over internet, we had to keep in mind that they're not going to be seeing it quite at broadcast quality anyway, but we still didn't want to step on the image any more than we had to. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, so we became more comfortable with these protocols. Everything in-house was SDI and ProRes, at 150 megabits, that kind of stuff. But then when all of a sudden we shifted to working at home, we're like, okay, we're going to have to make some compromises here. We built a tool that people would be able to capture a live stream at their home computer at about 5 to 10 megabits instead, and accepted H.264 as the codec for that, just because it was easier to handle. But so some compromises. Hopefully, we can then increase the quality in the future once network capabilities and standards get a little more adopted.
Yeah, so something I didn't, maybe I just didn't hear it or pay attention to it, but something that is, maybe, just as part of a production as any other thing is communications. What have you done to crack that nut in terms of, replacing your hard, intercom panels that we've come to know and love, and, with something else?
Yeah, that was actually, I'll jump in and answer that, because that was something I almost had a slide on, but that was a challenge that we anticipated in advance. But without everyone in the same room, there was no good way for them to communicate. We thought perhaps giving everyone a conference party line, a phone line, might be one solution. But we actually found a solution out there. A company called Unity has a server and an application that allow you to have a more traditional broadcast interface, where you can monitor any of a number of channels. You can direct intercom with anybody and monitor multiple channels at once. So we all had that running either on our phones alongside, or on our computers. Again, the nice thing with the flexibility of all this digital stuff is we could like have, our headphones be our comms and have our monitors be the program feed.
Mhm.
So we didn't have to, so we could still kind of manage it incrementally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Greg.
Yeah, good.
what-
Okay,
Go-
Greg.
Yeah, I mean, our collaboration is a little different in that we're not producing, many live type broadcast events, but there's certainly, tons of collaboration through, Slack messaging, Slack calls, a lot of what the setup at home is, I'm looking at right now. That's why I'm looking around. It's a zero client, a couple monitors, and that's kind of their, edit workstation at home. And then sidecar to that, they have a Surface or a corporate issued laptop, and they're on WebEx, they're on Slack, they're doing all those kinds of things, and that's what we're trying to really do is supply them with those additional tools, so they can really kind of feel virtually together to work through something creative. That's a big challenge, but I think we're getting close.
Mhm. Yeah, Scott, I think you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, so we've actually done a couple things. So we actually did a POC with a studio, and once again, from our standpoint, we from collaboration, it's really from Microsoft Office 365 and Teams, but really using Teams. So we actually had a director in LA, a unit sitting in like Alabama, another unit sitting in New Zealand, using Teams and other things to actually direct the shots and do things like that. Also, I'll drop it in the chat. There's actually a really cool video they just put out. This is actually how the folks at NBC Sports do their pre meetings for on Sunday Night Football. So stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is anybody working with audio manufacturers? Yeah, I guess this is more for Sewell and John. Are any of the or Scott rather? Is anybody working with audio manufacturers to solve the audio mixing issues, or to address those challenges?
That problem is absolutely being looked at, and we're looking at with some customers right now. Is that especially in this year, in certain cases, what we found was some of the customers, even like for live production, live sports production, the commentators were not allowed to go in the stadium. So they were producing, the audio was coming from a completely different location than where the video was. So getting the right audio level mixed in some ways and matching it with the video is a challenge. That's something, at least from my point of view, good to see what Scott thinks. Is that something we are working on right now with some customers and trying to solve it. There are a couple of ways and some few partners who are looking at it to solve that in terms of different audio tracks and other ways. But that's something we're actively looking at, I would say.
Yeah, we're probably very similar where, we do a lot of that kind of work for our first party stuff around collaboration in Teams. And, you can even use that for like NDI and to read that. But once again, a lot of times, we're really the infrastructure company. So we're the hyper platform. And then we really look, especially in the media side, we look for the people who really, those vendors who really bring in the IP to understand it. That's why when we talk about, editing, it's Avid and Adobe. Microsoft is going to make an editor. We can really empower them. So we work very closely with those folks. A lot of those partners we work, with our partnership with, for example, with Avid, that really does, has input back into our actual design of how we actually design the products and the services. So there's work with those partners who are doing that, and we're trying to see what we have to do. So, look at stuff like, it's not strictly audio, but all the SRT work that we've done with High Vision, with SRT Hub and things like that are examples of.
Okay. We have some questions that have come in from the audience. Those questions should be posted to the Q&A button, but we do have some that came in via the chat window. So I'm going to, one of them comes from Nathaniel. Can you ask about the delta between a fully loaded on-prem cost and cloud, and the hidden costs of cloud utilization. I guess that would be more for Anshul or Scott.
Yeah, I'll take the first crack at it. So this is something we do quite a bit. So it's really about the modeling, and and once again, I think your organization really needs to take a look at how they handle capex versus opex. So that's a big decision, and some people are more looking at from the opex model. But what we've actually done is, I mean, I just worked through this just over the last couple of weeks, is, hey, at a per seat, if you have X number of editors and you're looking at, fully loaded clients, maybe 2 different types of clients, back end, maybe it's online storage, X number of editors with Avid, getting down to a cost per seat that you can look at with that. So that's definitely a piece that you could take a look. But you also have to look at the other things. So many times when you say like, hey, I want to look at on-prem versus cloud, they'll say, here are some server racks and here's your cloud costs. We're like, well, what about your data facilities? What about the guy who's like sweeping and vacuuming the servers? What about HVAC? What about all those other costs? It isn't those, 5 servers inside of there. So when you do that, make sure you model your ROI between them. But also a lot of those models really with CapEx, it's, over, 5 years. And I think when you think about the dynamics of what you can do, if you understand this, is the ability to spin something up for a project. So today, if you had a production, hey, we're going to go into production 6 months, I'm going to call up a vendor and get an Avid and rent the Avid, and then I'm going to turn it back in. Now that's like, you could do that internally. You spin that up and spin it back down. So it's really kind of some of it's actually the raw numbers where they're, they could, you'll see advantages. Certain things like rendering is one, burst rendering and going out to the cloud with all that horsepower, those are easy. But when you look at these editing workstations, those are some of the models you have to work through and see what really fits for your organization and what their philosophies are. And then also like with COVID, it doesn't matter because you're not going in. So, once again, you kind of that where it really didn't matter with them. You have people who are like barely getting by because they can't go into their office. I mean, the last in-person meeting I had, it was March 9th. I went to 30 Rock, and then I didn't ride the subway for 4 months, and I live in New York City. So you also have that's kind of coming into it as well.
Yeah. We have another question from Alan Zimzumir. I may be mangling that quite a bit. Forgive me if I am. For a typical independent post-production under 10 edit bays, how much data bandwidth is required to work in a virtualized environment?
Like from a Teradici standpoint, if everything was virtualized and everything's running in the cloud, the rule of thumb is about 20 megabits down per monitor. So, if you're having dual monitor, if you have a decent internet cable connection or something else, that's really what you need. Now, if you start looking at, a hybrid scenario where you're replicating content up and down all over that, but if you just want the edit experience, the good rule of thumb is 20 megabit down per monitor, and then, a decent latency.
Okay. And then we have go ahead.
No, I was saying I totally agree. It's fine.
Okay. Then we have a question from Vishul Palmer. And this is, he's directing this to John. When you guys were broadcasting via the cloud for the presidential debates, how did you manage to do PIP and lower thirds without having any hardware?
Good question. I'll address the lower thirds first. That's part of the Singular Live package. So that's a full graphics package that allows us to take any graphics that we want presented through the JavaScript and other kind of web technologies, but then it outputs as an alpha channel that can then be overlaid within the Grass Valley master control. So it's a add-on package that works really well with it. But the picture-in-picture is a really interesting question because we ran into that problem and didn't know how to solve it because Grass Valley didn't have that feature built into the master control switcher for the setup that we had. But we realized, well, wait a minute, this is all virtual. We can just create another switcher. So we created another one and had that running, in another window on another system, and piped the output of that into the main master control. So we had our engineers kind of set that all up with the multiple feeds going into it. And then the technical director didn't have to worry about it. They just saw it as another input to their control switcher. So it really, underscored the flexibility of that. Had we, made that decision beforehand, do we need picture-in-picture? We might have said no. We might have said we don't want to spend the money on it. But, once it's as easy as flipping a switch, then it really helps make a difference for us. I will say, just to kind of talk on the finance aspects that Scott was referencing a moment ago, it does create challenges trying to project what your OpEx are going to be, because we'd plan out what we wanted to do, and then the finance people would say, well, how many hours are you going to need so many resources for? And we try to project that. But then in the heat of the moment, someone says, oh, I want to spin up, PIP. We realized, oh, that's going to add, X dollars per hour to our system. So the only thing we could come up with for all of the finance conversations was overestimate. Worst case scenario, keep this stuff running for many hours. Then if they're not going to argue as much if we go under, but we don't want them to feel like they're throwing money away on systems. You also have to remember to turn them off at night.
Overestimate and come in under and look like a hero.
Exactly.
To go back to the cost, the one thing that might be kind of hidden, that's always a thing to remember, is you can, some things you can model, like, hey, these aren't going to be on 24/7, and editors might work, 200 hours a month or something like that. But really factoring in sometimes the egress. So, us and Google and AWS are all the same. It's free to come in, but you have egress coming out. Really taking a look at, things like that. The other that you just said, John, is those safety mechanisms, right? Like, as I mentioned earlier, I have a budget. If you spin up a 24 node big VM to do 4K editing, and I forget to turn that thing down, or I did turn off on a Friday, that's why I put a rule in there. All my VMs, like, oh, it's turned off. It turns off. That demo I had, it turns off at 7 o'clock every night, even if I forget to do it. So those are very key.
Those are the things that'll wake you up in the middle of the night and be like, oh crap, I forgot to stop and deallocate that VM. But yeah, as we scale this out in the sense of a cloud VDI sort of offering in our environment, we look to a broker, right, that can integrate with the APIs, whether it's any of them, right, Google, Azure, or AWS, to be able to have that ability when user logs off, it stops the VM. And then the next time it fires back up is when somebody actually tries to access in through the system, and through the broker, and kind of handles that. And that can be a huge cost control.
Yeah, we have a second question from Visual, which is someone who is currently in the video and film business that does not have cloud IT experience. What do you recommend in how to learn Azure and, well, I guess Google, we could say, without any knowledge in the cloud world?
Yeah, so I would say, and really with either cloud, it's like, first, understand the basics of how the cloud works. Microsoft's cloud and Google's cloud are both, there's a lot of services and a lot of things. So first of all, understand the basics, how to use a portal and maybe some of the key things. And then, there's a lot of training on that, like free stuff, right? That you can just go, and there's all these things that you could take a look at. But then I would really step back and say, what are the key components that I need for a workflow? So like, you're not going to have to learn about AI models or, how to stand up a XYZ cluster. It's like, hey, do I understand compute with GPUs? Do I understand storage? Do I understand it? So you can actually kind of get it into, I'm a big believer in baby steps and bite sizes. You can really, once you understand the basics, then you can kind of think about what services you need.
Yeah, I think I'll just agreeing again with Scott. I think, and to be honest, most of the principles across clouds are similar. So yes, the terminology we may use is a little bit different, or the way so I think the basics are same. And Scott was saying there's a lot of material across different clouds on YouTube, on Coursera, and other places. But also, I think once you get that level of knowledge, and I think, and also working with some people who have gone through this journey, is that actually you look at these, there are a lot of reference architectures people are posting and how they have deployed their solutions on GitHub and other places. Try and replicate that to start to the point of taking baby steps and try and replicate those different solutions and take it from there. So absolutely, it is possible, and yeah, we're all on that journey together.
Yeah, you would say that's actually a good point. You know, GitHub is a great resource. I'll post a link into the chat. So we actually worked with someone to put this together, where it's just a very simple, you know, it's a GitHub, it's a PowerShell script. So if you understand PowerShell, so literally you know, there's some things you have to do. You have to talk to Teradici, get a license, but you run this script, it's going to ask you questions, right? Like, oh, how many users do you want? What kind of profile? You know, within a half hour, it's going to fully build out, you know, half hour-ish, a full-blown, you know, VDI infrastructure. That's a POC. You know, it's not going to have the, you know, Greg's got a lot of cool stuff with probably multiple networks and security and VMs. But if you just want to think about that, you know, that's a way you could stand this up, and then you can go and start kicking the tires. So it also really matters a lot how you learn. I mean, I'm more of a, I'm not going to read the whole manual. I might like learn a little bit, then stand some stuff up and play with it and find out what I don't know. So I think also a way you approach it, but something like that, take a look at that. That's actually pretty cool, because that actually will stand you up a full-blown VDI. Once again, make sure you have an Azure subscription and all that kind of stuff. You know, I think I actually will ask you when you want to turn them off at night, so you don't reconfigure that.
Yeah, that's great advice, Scott. And that's, you know, for just from my own learning path, how I'm learning the cloud is just that. It's a lot of these, you know, GitHub repos. You guys worked with Avid on a really cool one for editorial in the cloud. So you can kind of deploy it, see how it all works, and then kind of break it apart, build it up yourself, and you learn a lot along the way. The other thing I'll say is it's a really great time for the person who asked the question, if you're kind of wanting to learn about IT and, you know, how that's working in post-production. You know, and with a click of the button, we have access to a home lab now, right? We don't have to buy a server, a network switch, some storage to set that all up. You know, it's right there. And for the purpose of learning, there's these free tiers, and you can get in and you can start to really understand, you know, just the core concepts, you know, of like Scott said, compute, network, and storage, and run from there.
And another thing too is as we move, and probably definitely a lot of enterprises is, and you know, I work for Microsoft, and I have required training and certification and classes I have to do, you know, actually on a monthly basis. So I just got my December done, and I think January too. But you know, there's these things that you'll actually see. So once again, there's some things that are very formal that, like, I have to pass another certification exam by XYZ date. So as your organizations will change, you'll probably see some of that skilling aspect become part of your jobs, where, you know, the cloud actually becomes part of your job profiles over time. You know, I've been at Microsoft a really long time. So when I started at Microsoft, we didn't have a cloud, right? Well, I guess it was back in MSN, right? We just sold a couple products. I've been at Microsoft over 20 years. So that's what you kind of think about, how this actually evolves, and that constant learning that you really need to take a look at.
Yeah, I guess Windows NT was a thing when you started. Yeah,
NT351. Actually, somewhere around here, I actually got a stack of floppies. Where you remember we put those, you install on floppy disk. Yeah.
So we have we have another question from Peter Back. Are you able to edit on Avid from any remote location where cuts can be viewed by the director in real time and good quality? I guess this gets back to the monitoring discussion.
I'll take a stab at this one. I think there's two parts to this. There's being able to remotely edit with Avid from anywhere. You know, I think Scott did a really nice job in his presentation, kind of setting some of those baseline expectations, you know, with latency and things like that. But, you know, if you have really decent connectivity to wherever these VMs are actually being hosted, right? you're going to have a really good experience. It's totally viable. And then from that remote monitoring standpoint, that's one of the cool things that we've kind of built out is that ability to feed out through, Avid's video output, whether, you have a video IO card or use NDI, and you can flip that to something like SRT. And that's proving to really be, for the receiving end, really low latency, sub-second type of latency. So you can really have that high quality monitoring for the director, and the editor can really kind of follow along to his or her feedback.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into our next question from Joe Lagrasso, which what is the breaking point, go, no go, for production latencies for live events? Can the cloud deliver the content?
I can take a shot at this. I think, yeah, absolutely. I think from a live production point of view, from content delivery and distribution point of view, absolutely. From play out and delivery, those problems, I mean, a lot of customers are already doing it on cloud. From a live production workflows, we are increasingly seeing even use cases now from essentially camera to the cloud to deliver, to Greg's point, to that sub-second latency in certain cases. A lot of it depends on the is what we call it as first mile, essentially, where your live content or live feed is coming from in those cases, whether it is coming from open internet in certain cases, whether it's coming over fiber, etc., and what is the latency of that, because that's where majority of the gap is. So, and that's where you can, as I was saying before, try out a production workflow in a minimum viable product, establish a baseline, understand if that baseline it works for your business, and where are the optimization that can be done. Most of the optimization we see that are required are in the ingest workflow. So using, in certain cases, even we're discussing a lot about the SRT and those protocols, absolutely essential, but there's always a trade-off, right? On the level of error correction that you require on your content versus the latency that you introduce doing that powered error correction in certain ways. So we recommend doing the minimum that is required, using a reliable network in certain cases to do that. So all of that are different steps that can be taken, but absolutely you see a lot of these use cases utilizing cloud.
And we have a question here from an anonymous questioner. What are your thoughts on the final frontier? Is the cloud-based cloud-based camera robotics and talent tracking using facial recognition and object tracking something that could be useful for a hands-off content capture with remote control?
This is kind of, these are starting to get to some of those questions, and it's like when we talk about AI, you kind of have the science of it, and then you also have the creativity piece of it. So, the interaction between camera operators and directors and how that actually works. Now, from a technology standpoint, you can do some really cool things. However, are you going to get the creative process and the shots and the interaction needed to actually get what you want out of there? So I think that's, yeah, it's really hard to say, because some of it is, some is science and some is art, and where's the line between science and art? Just simply with captions is a great way, because we've done a lot of testing around captions where it's more art than science sometimes.
And then we have a question from Lucas, which with the gained experiences, is there a trend to be seen that is low latency requirements by live production and getting loosened up? What is the expectation of low latency when considering the future of 211022, introducing delay by itself, and 211031 based on workflows for the cloud live production?
Yeah, I would say when you think about production, I would say, things that are like file-based play out, of content that you're actually playing. We're seeing a lot of people do that in the cloud. Now, if you start looking at, things, think about, broadcast news and all these news stations. So that's where latency comes back in. And really you have to think about what you can do at the edge and what you can do in the cloud. So what we've been talking to some customers about, depending on where you're at, is instead of running something in the big cloud, imagine you can run that. So for example, we have Azure Stack Edge that are running that we're partnered with AT&T. So you could actually have that cloud, but have it push closer to you to reduce those latencies. But at a certain point, it just really comes down to physics, right? And the speed of light and things that are traveling across wires. So I think you have to take a look at your workflows in live, especially when you start getting to, getting into those scenarios, especially we start talking about like local news stations and all the broad, if, some of these places in the US, and, I just saw Google's map earlier, they're very similar where we have all our workstations. But if you're somewhere in the, not sure, if you're sitting in, XYZ location in the US, can you actually get what you need to a big cloud? Do you need something more that is, on the edge? And what can you do on the edge and really enabling that edge so doesn't have to be in the big cloud is interesting.
Yeah, I think just to add on what Scott was saying, I think especially in general, we see with the new SMPTE evolving standard that's coming up, I don't think it's more from introducing or loosening the latency requirement, but I think in some ways giving the flexibility in certain cases on what level of forward error correction is required, what standards you need it in certain cases. So I think those define your workflows in certain cases to find reliable network in certain cases. You don't even need those that level of error correction, because typically I think in live production workflows, we have all, I think the industry has started off from doing live video transmission from a phone to YouTube. And then we're trying to work backwards to a premium live event capture in a low latency environment. So I think some of the habits and the way we are doing it has to be unlearned, and some has to be learned in some ways to do that.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because think about the stuff you see now and how much of it is on like, I don't have one of the new phones yet with 5G, but I'm really curious about what it could do over 5G. Could I actually sit here and, remote edit in 5G in my apartment? That could be kind of cool, or sometimes if I'm driving somewhere and I need to pull over and do a meeting, 5G, and I could, jump into a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting and share all this. That'd be awesome. Not while I'm driving, I pull over.
So we have a question from Josh. How are the cloud platforms different? Are there some better than others for specific applications? There's a leading question for Anshul and Scott.
As a non-vendor participant, I can maybe give you a little of the thought process and which one we're choosing, or it's tricky, right? Because there are these partnerships going on where applications or storage file systems you're seeing this trend of these alliances, right? So for example, Microsoft and Avid have a big partnership, and we as customers at with this HBO system, it's heavily Avid for the full stack, right? It's the Avid Media Central platform, it's the shared storage, the editor, we have Adobe, plenty of that as well for application stuff. But from a transition perspective, it's a lot easier to kind of stay on that path where Avid has their Nexus file system in the cloud. So from that aspect, that's kind of the path we're taking. Yet we have many colleagues and counterparts from the enterprise larger side that are heavily in AWS. So there's some expertise on that side. So it's a huge challenge, right? And it's somewhere I hope that it doesn't go where there's like this big vendor lock-in so that whoever the person who submitted the question is like, to be able to have the best of both worlds, right? You kind of just pick the right tool for the job. But it gets tricky because if you start pumping data into one cloud, for instance, you start archiving everything into, cloud A, but, your editors are going to be accessing stuff in cloud B, then you have to start egressing stuff from one provider to the other, and the bill starts.
The egress costs, yeah.
So it's tricky, and hopefully, those things don't become so locked in.
One thing I'll say too is there are differences between the clouds. So really take a look. I mean, just one thing in general is, Microsoft has a more partner focused. So if you want to have XYZ solution, hey, you want to do some, broadcast level transcoding, you partner with one of our partners. Could be Telestream, could be somebody else. So I think from some people might have more first party, might be a partner approach. There's all these different things. They're very similar, and we probably leapfrog each other month to month on different aspects. So, but I think the partner ecosystem is really key thing to take a look at inside of there. And if they're really nitty gritty, technical details, I think we're probably really similar, like on our storage stack for us, how Google does it with API. So all matters how deep you need to do what you need to drive in there. So.
And I think the only thing I would add on top, I totally agree at a base level, as we were saying before, most of the clouds are similar and the principles are similar. I think from all of us, we're trying to define it, at least from Google, we look at it, define it in 3 different areas, and depends if that works for you. One is our infrastructure, especially our network. Second, focusing on AI and ML capabilities. But thirdly, I think increasingly importantly is we believe actually one cloud is maybe not the right answer for everyone in some ways. So we believe in a multi-cloud future, open future in some ways, like even Greg was saying, from a partner ecosystem point of view, I think in the future that we see that most providers, ISVs or technology providers will be present on all clouds, and that's in their best interest to do that also. And beyond that, being able to letting customers choose for cloud for their immediate need, and maybe in a lot of these cases more than one cloud, because we believe that that's going to be the future.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So we've worked on you could have a scenario where maybe someone is on they have like a automation, their supply chains on one cloud. And I've just worked with someone too, where like, hey, I'm gonna take this, and I'm saying I want AI. I could get, hey, Google does some great stuff on AI for this little piece of the puzzle. Microsoft over here, I'm gonna send that out and pull that back and integrate. So we even have some integration going from one cloud into Azure for an Avid workflow, and when they're finished working, goes back in. So this isn't the this isn't way back when soup to nuts on one cloud. The multi-cloud and things moving around definitely comes into it.
We have another question from Anonymous. As I watched the presentations and was encouraged to see both Avid and Adobe workflows enabled in the cloud, are there any technology providers that are providing media storage and virtual workstations in the cloud that will interop with both editing software tools so creatives can choose their preferred tools and collaborate? Is there a holy grail?
Oh, I would say there's a bunch. I know we talked a lot about the front end from an editor standpoint. There's a once again, you got the basis of storage on both clouds, and you'll see MAM vendors with their different, probably a lot of them are on-prem, some are cloud only, will have those additional capabilities to tie in. I don't know if there's a holy grail, because it really depends on what the workflow is. Every customer I talk to has Adobe. Most customers I talk to has Adobe and Avid for different pieces of the workflow for different parts of the job, and they choose the right tool, and you kind of have it from there.
Yeah, agreed. Both from the application perspective, both work great in both, in all the platforms. I think it really comes down to, what does the rest of the picture look like? What other systems beyond the editors that tie in? Do you have asset management systems? Do you have storage that has, is it an Avid file system or something else that you're doing project bin sharing with. So all that kind of, then starts to steer you one or the other.
Yeah, we have one final question because we are running out of time here. We've heard from large media enterprises managing migrating to the cloud. What about the sole proprietor or a small shop? That how would they best move into the cloud?
I think one thing there too is there's two models, right? I know with the big enterprises, they really kind of want to build their own thing, but there are editing at these resources as a service. So that's where Bebop is a service you can go and just get a desktop and pay for it that way. Avid has their edit on demand, so you can kind of think you have a choice. Do you want to build something and run it, or do you want a SaaS service? So you can kind of start thinking about the SaaS from these vendors, and there's several of them out there. On our side, Bebop, Stratuscore, Avid, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
think some of the
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think one of the financial considerations that's good for large companies also works for the sole proprietor. You've got the opportunity to use maybe a system that you couldn't afford to install in your location, but maybe for a project you need it. And there you spin it up for a couple of weeks, and then you're done.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think we've hit our mark here at 8 o'clock, and I want to thank all of you for being on board with this and for participating, and especially Anshul, who is up so late. You're going to need to get some rest here. So I'm going to turn it over to Wes to close it out.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate all the comments that have come in. And any final thoughts? Any of the panel members want to leave us with? Anything you want us to carry off into the night?
Just stay safe and have a great holiday season.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Scott.
Yes. Happy holidays.
And speaking of holidays, we do have our SMPTE holiday party. All of you are invited to attend. It will be Monday, December 21st. I'm not quite sure of the time. Is it 5:30 or 6 p.m.?
I believe it's 5:30.
And it will be virtual, so
yes,
unlimited refreshments. Anything you want to get out of your own fridge is. But
who's sponsoring that for my fridge?
Yes,
you are.
We'll have some virtual currency available,
Yeah.
And maybe some virtual door prizes. But we're looking forward to it. We'd love to have all you gentlemen join us. Really, really, really good session. I hope all of you have good backing to provide all this information, because it was much more informative than a lot of the other presentations I've sat through in the past 12 months. So thank you very, very much. It was excellent.
Yes, thank you very much. And everybody have a wonderful holiday.
Thanks, Ed. And hopefully we'll see y'all at the party on the 21st.
Yes, thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, take care.